Greetings. Dr. Mark Winton here from the Department of Criminal Justice at the University of Central Florida, and this video is for CCJ 4651, Drugs and Crime. So first I would like to welcome you to the Drugs and Crime course, and in this video I'll just mention a few things from the syllabus and a couple things from chapter 1, and I'll be making videos throughout the course that hopefully help you in preparing for exams, studying, and learning about some of the aspects there with drugs and crime. It's a huge field to start with, and it's interesting when I think about the first course I took on drugs. It was way back in undergrad school in a psychology course. And then later on I would take another course in my counseling program years and years ago when I was a counselor on treating addictions, and I would end up studying different types of addictions and continuing education programs for my recertification and licensure as a counselor. But I haven't practiced in quite some time. I devote most of my time now to teaching and research. If you've ever taken a course with me before in the online environment, my thought process and the way I have it set up relatively similar. If you haven't, hopefully it's easy to navigate. I'm always available online. We can discuss any matters related to the course, and what you'll find is that I try to keep everything organized so it's readily accessible. So basically, you look at your home page and you find the syllabus there. You also find links to the course PowerPoints that I'll have. Each week I'll post in the announcement section the readings and also links to any YouTube videos and any other additional material that you should take a look at that may be on our homepage, or a link to something. I'll have that in the announcements. You can email me anytime. I check my emails a dozen times a day or so. So first thing you want to do is check out the syllabus, read through it. You can see I think basically I follow pretty consistently chapter 1 through chapter 16. I'll have some additional material on some specialized topics and during some of the weeks, and that of course will be posted in the announcement section. Our textbook, Drug, Society, and Criminal Justice, Leventhal and Russman Levins, 5th edition. Really a lot of material in here. So it really, like I said, that there's so many different areas that we could study here. And the first chapter is kind of an overview: Drug, Society, and Criminal Justice. Chapter 1 is titled Understanding the Drug Problem in America. So they really kind of start talking about how drugs are all around us, on the news, on the internet, in our professional lives, maybe our personal lives, and also the problems that we see. And more recently, we've seen a huge problem with opiate addictions and drug overdoses and increased homicide rates, and we'll focus a little bit on that later on as a topic. And so we have a lot of problems we have to address. The monetary cost is in the billions, and you think about treatment, you think about the criminal justice system, operations involving law enforcement, corrections, and the courts, and all the indirect costs where stresses and strains on community, social disorder, problems related to psychological, social, and physical health of someone misusing substances, and the stresses and strains on friendships and personal family relationships and work relationships and the like. So there are obviously some problems that we have to deal with. And there's different understandings of drugs and society. Your authors point out that there's two basic ways to look at that, and they say first is the impact of society on drug taking behavior, and then secondly the impact of drug taking behavior on society. So we start thinking about how this all interconnects, and then the policies and the laws and what we attempt to do. In my policy class that I've been teaching for a number of years, it's a graduate level course I teach here at UCF Online, and for years now I've been focusing on heroin abuse and addiction and our failure, basically. And what has frustrated me is, I still have a video I did maybe 10 or 12 years ago talking about what I see as occurring as a problem, and it's just like watching it get worse and worse and trying to think, what can we do? What do we need to do? Some of the recommendations that I presented from other researchers that even presented those before that 10 or 12 year period are finally being implemented. And so, on the one hand I said, well, okay, that's great, but on the other hand, what took so long? And so time is of the essence as well here. Okay, so what is, a drug? And according to your authors, a drug is, to quote them, a chemical substance that, when taken into the body, alters the structure or functioning of the body in some way. So that's pretty broad of a definition there. So often we'll want to focus on specific drugs, and we'll look at some differences throughout, whether they're prescription medications, ones that are legal for certain age groups like alcohol, nicotine, and then also illegal use of drugs, street drugs as they say. We'll look at the different types of use. Instrumental use: it's a person taking a drug with a socially approved goal in mind, such as to reduce pain from an injury. And then recreational use, which is taking the drug for the purpose of experience the psychoactive aspects, which basically would be the person takes that drug to get high. There's a lot of definitions that you'll see. I'm not going to go over those in detail because they're in your textbook, like brand name versus generic name, natural product names, street names. And the interesting thing is, when you start looking at street names, there's literally, there could be just hundreds of different names for a small number of drugs. And I'll point you in the direction of where you can get that information, but I don't expect you to know every single name. And the names change over time. Of course, illegal drugs and ones that are legal, and then they start looking at the differences on the terminology. For example, misuse, drug abuse, drug dependence, substance use disorder. Start looking at things such as toxicity and the dose, effective dose, lethal dose, therapeutic index, margin of safety. These are all important to understand some of the effects and maybe some of the rationales related to policies, to interventions, to prevention. One thing that I find useful is this is the desk reference to the Diagnostic and Criteria from the DSM-5, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Being trained originally as a counselor, this is what I would use, and then I would look at the whole features here. One of the things I think that's important to recognize is that, okay, so you're thinking about substance-related and addictive disorders, has a whole section as mental disorder. Often we see in society, when people have substance-related and addictive disorders, they also have comorbidity with multiple disorders, and so they may have other mental disorders that we need to consider, and they may have medical conditions that may be very relevant as well. And so often we have to take a holistic approach and look at the big picture. As I mentioned, we've had a lot of problems with emergencies related to overdoses and deaths. That's been an ongoing problem. And then when you want to know the extent of it, we start looking at epidemiological studies of drug use. And there's several very popular ones, like the Monitoring the Future program. And the authors go over that and talk about the different questions that are used. For example, if the individual has ever used a certain drug, has used a certain drug in the past year, has used certain drug in the past 30 days, has used a certain drug on a daily basis during the previous 30 days. And so when we start talking about drug use, we want to be very specific so we know what we're talking about in terms of frequency, different types of drugs and things of that nature. For example, I saw in a community group there was postings that drug paraphernalia was found on the ground in a neighborhood, and what does that mean? There's so many different things that could mean. So I'd want specific information. What exactly is it? And a photograph would be nice as well. Maybe it's not. Maybe it is. It's interesting to look at all this and what would be considered drug paraphernalia by one person may not be, for another person. Another problem that we face is drug use by those in the school system, high school students, for example, junior high students, the youth, and you can look at some of the rates there of illicit drug use among 8th, 10th, and 12th graders. Your authors point that out, looking at the Monitoring the Future data and the percentage of students. And again, what's real important when you start looking at that data is to look at what they're actually measuring, the type of drug, and then the frequency. Is that ever used? Is that particular year? And how often is it used? These are often different questions that we want to address. Also, there's a big issue of illicit drug use among college students, and whether that's marijuana or other illicit drugs, but also a big concern is alcohol use among college students as well. And so that kind of gets us into just a brief introduction to the course. My goal is for you to learn as much as you can, utilizing the textbook, the links, the YouTube videos that I'll make. We have 3 exams, and I will post a review guide to help you focus your studying at least 1 week before the actual exam. And also we have some short writing assignments as well, and I'll post more on that in the web course. So again, I try not to make these too long because I could talk for hours and hours and hours, but I don't want to do that. So I'm getting toward the 15-minute mark, so I'm going to go under 15 minutes here and just welcome you all to the course. If you have any questions about the course, please email me. I'll get right back to you. And I wish you all success. Thank you.